Tariffs. They sound so simple. Just a tax on goods from other countries to help out our own businesses. But in 2025, that simple idea really crashed head-on into a super complex reality. We're talking court battles, global blowback, and real costs that hit all of us. So let's unpack what really happens when the simple theory of tariffs meets the messy, messy reality of today.
And no, that's not a line from some Hollywood blockbuster. That was the actual reaction from the former president after a federal court shot down his signature tariff policy. The stakes couldn't be higher, right? It just perfectly frames the whole conflict we're digging into, a massive fight over trade, presidential power, and really the future of the entire American economy. Okay, before we dive into all the chaos of 2025, let's just make sure we're on the same page. A tariff is, at its core, just a tax you put on stuff coming into the country. The whole idea is to make foreign products more expensive, hopefully encouraging you to buy stuff made right here at home. It seems like a pretty straightforward tool, but as we saw, using it can set off this wild chain reaction that, well, nobody can really control.
And this is the story we always hear, isn't it? It's the political sales pitch. And honestly, it sounds great. Foreigners will pay for it, our trade deficits will just vanish, jobs will come pouring back home, and it's all thanks to this powerful tool that has, no downside. But is that what actually happens when you look at the data? That brings us right to 2025, the year that this simple story just ran smack into a huge reality check. And that check was delivered by the U.S. court system. And this wasn't some minor legal thing. It was a moment that basically shook the foundations of American trade policy.
And man, this all went down fast. It all kicked off on April 2nd, which the administration called Liberation Day, when they dropped these massive new tariffs. But just a month later, the courts were already pushing back. There was a little pause for some talks with China, but then bam, the final legal hammer came down in August. It was just this incredible rapid-fire sequence of policy, protest, and legal drama.
So what was the bottom line from the courts? Well, they found that the president had overreached. The judges basically said that the law being used, this 1977 Emergency Powers Act, was never meant to give a president unlimited authority to just tax imports from pretty much every country on the planet. This ruling was a major check on the power of the executive branch.
Okay, so with all that legal drama as our backdrop, let's go back to that simple tariff story. It's time to break down some of the biggest myths by putting the political idea right up against the economic reality. First up, and this is the big one, who actually pays for these tariffs? The idea is so simple. Foreigners pay the tax, but a mountain of economic evidence shows the reality is that the bill lands right here at home. It's the American importers who pay the tax at the border, and they almost always pass that cost on to American consumers and businesses, you and me.
The easiest way to get your head around this is to think of a tariff like a brand new toll booth on the main highway into your town. Sure, the delivery truck driver is the one who physically pays the toll, but you can bet the supermarket is going to raise the price of groceries to cover that new cost. So at the end of the day, it's you, the shopper, who's really paying for that toll. And that toll is not just some theory. Researchers over at Yale's Budget Lab calculated that the 2025 tariffs cost the average U.S. household a whopping $2,400 in lost income. That's a real hit to the family budget, showing up as higher prices on everything from your clothes to the parts for your car.
Okay, so what about fixing the trade deficit? The idea is that tariffs are the magic wand. But economists, well, they point to a totally different reality. They say trade deficits are these big macroeconomic things driven by national savings and investment rates, not just trade policy. Tariffs usually just shuffle around where we buy our stuff from, not how much we buy overall.
In fact, trying to fix a trade deficit with tariffs is kind of like squeezing a balloon. Yeah, you can clamp down on imports from one place, but the deficit just bulges out somewhere else as we start buying from another country. You haven't changed the total amount of air in the balloon, you've just moved it around.
And jobs? What about jobs? The promise is always that tariffs will bring jobs flooding back home, but the reality is a story of trade-offs. Sure, they might help a few protected industries, like, say, steel producers, but they really hurt the much larger group of businesses downstream, think car makers or construction companies, that need to buy that now more expensive steel. When their costs go up, they hire fewer people, often leading to a net loss of jobs for the whole economy.
And that downstream pain? It shows up in the numbers, big time. That same Yale study estimated that by the end of 2025, the U.S. economy would have over 500,000 fewer jobs than it would have without the tariffs.
That is a huge, stark figure that really shows you the hidden cost.
So, after busting some of the biggest myths, let's zoom out. Who are the real winners and losers in this whole tariff story? And look, if these big blanket tariffs aren't really the answer, what are the smarter alternatives?
You can see this trade-off so clearly when you look at the long-term projections. That Yale study found that, yeah, manufacturing output might get a small bump, about 2.1%, but a massive sector like construction, which needs all those materials, it actually shrinks by 3.6%. The gains in one little area are just completely wiped out by the losses everywhere else.
So when you put it all together, a really clear picture of winners and losers starts to form. The relative winners, it's those protected producers and maybe some shipping companies that profit from rerouting everything. But the clear losers, well, that's a much longer list. Manufacturers, small businesses that can't absorb the costs, are farmers and exporters who face retaliation, and especially low-income families who feel those higher prices the most.
Now, a question that always pops up is about personal financial gain. And to be clear, there's no hard evidence showing these tariff policies directly put money into the Trump family's real estate or hotel businesses. But there is a plausible indirect link. This whole tough-on-trade stance is absolutely central to a political brand, and that brand commands massive attention, which can then be monetized through other things, like media companies or, more recently, even crypto projects. So the connection is indirect, but it's built on the power of the brand itself.
So if these blanket tariffs are basically a sledgehammer, what does a more surgical approach look like? Well, experts point to a few things. Instead of broad taxes, you can use targeted remedies that require actual proof of harm, things like anti-dumping duties. You can negotiate minimum price agreements to stop unfair competition on certain goods, and this is a big one. You can invest right here at home in our own ports and workforce skills to make us more competitive. And finally, you can build stronger supply chains with trusted allies, something people call friendshoring. The whole key is to be precise, not just disruptive.
And this gets to a really important distinction, something worth looking into if you're curious. How are these traditional trade remedies, which involve all these detailed investigations, different from the broad slap-it-on-everything tariffs we saw in 2025? Understanding that difference is key to understanding trade policy. And here's an even deeper one for you. We mentioned that trade deficits are macroeconomic, right? Well, the core idea behind that is something called the savings investment gap. If you look this up, you'll start to see exactly why most economists are so sure that tariffs alone can never ever solve a trade imbalance. It gets to the real root cause of the whole thing.
So, we're left with this big question. With U.S. courts drawing a line in the sand on presidential power and our trading partners getting way faster at hitting back, are we maybe seeing the end of an era? Is the blanket tariff on its way out as a primary tool of foreign policy? It seems like 2025 might have been the year the simple story about tariffs finally got a whole lot more complicated for everybody.